A good life is a life built around fulfilling work, play, relationships, and lifelong learning. Welcome to Good Life Conversations, where we explore the stories and strategies of inspiring everyday people who are striving to create a life of purpose, meaning, and connection. Hi there, and welcome to this Good Life Conversation. My name is Jay. I'm your host and the founder of Discover Year, and today's guest is Marisa Murray. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you.
So Marisa is currently the founder and chief executive coach at a company called Leaderley International. Marisa has, like many of our mentors, a very interesting pathway of achieving her ultimate goal right now of owning her own company and working for herself. She studied chemical engineering in university. She was an executive. She was a high-ranking officer at a couple of big companies here in Canada, and she found her way into a totally different segment in work, in midlife. So Marisa has a lot of interesting things to share, and so thanks again for being here, Marisa. And the first question we always like to dive in with is to tell us a little bit of a life in the day. Marisa is a mom and a wife, mom to two kids and a wife. She owns her own business. So tell us a little bit about what time do you get up? Do you have morning routines? A little bit about the work you do. How much do you work in a day? How do you wind down? What time do you go to bed?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to feel really boring when I tell you that part because um, I go to bed really early.
What's really early?
I dive into bed usually around 9:30,
Yep.
so it's pretty early. And I wasn't always that way. I used to stay up a lot later, but I found over the years I just love my sleep more and more. It just sets you up in terms of your attitude, your mood, your energy levels for the next day. So I do dive into bed like it's the most nurturing activity. I do like to read before bed, and I like to read an actual book as much as I love my Kindle, love my iPad, love digital media. I find the best way for me to wind down is an actual physical book. And so I do a little bit of reading, but I don't get that far, a few pages, and I usually fall asleep. I wake up quite early and I wake up naturally, and that wasn't always the way either. I started realizing that it's pretty cool if you go to bed, if you set your bedtime instead of your wake up time. You calculate like when you want to wake up, and I know I usually sleep around 7 or 8 hours, depending on the day. So I calculate my wake up time and I go to bed earlier if I need to wake up earlier. So that's when I'm being really good to myself, and that is not all the time. But I do wake up pretty early, early meaning like in the fives, usually. And I have a pretty regimented, like I like to meditate in the morning. I I do exercise 4 times per week. So there's days that I know that I'm going to do strength training or yoga or running. So I do have kind of this get these things that are really important self-care things done early before anyone else is needing me.
Mm, mm.
And that includes my work and that includes my family. So I try to do those things early. It's where I have my highest discipline. It means I can only have to shower and get dressed once. That's the thing with if you try to do a workout later, then you kind of have to redo yourself. I'm usually at my office after the morning routine with I only have one son at home now. My other son is away at university. So that's usually done around 7:30. I'm at the office by 8, and usually my first meeting's around 8. And I'm very lucky because I own my own company. So my office is a 6-minute walk from my house, which I designed. So I do run home for lunch because I like getting a little brisk walk. 6 minutes walk, it's not that much. Little brisk walk, eating at home, quick salad typically, and then back to work around 1. And my end of day is somewhere between 5 and 6, and then my little 6-minute walk back to home is ideal. And then the evening is trying to eat a family meal if we can. It's not always the possible, but if we can be together, spend a minute being grateful for something about the day. And then, clean up, sometimes a little walk at night, and back to bed.
The earlier the better. Yeah. Okay, I have a few questions that stem from that. First is, sounds like you give yourself some grace in terms of the exact time you go to bed and the exact time you wake up. Sounds to me like there's like kind of a window of time that you aim to achieve.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? What does that look like exactly? You said 5-ish, so you let yourself wake up. and at whatever time feels right.
Yeah, well, basically, I don't set an alarm. So sometimes I wake up naturally at 4:45, and then I'll be like, "Oh, do I want to roll over and have a little nap, or is it time to get up?" And sometimes I just feel like it's time to get up, and sometimes I roll over and have a little nap. The very latest I would get up is around 6 or 6:30 at the very latest, but it's pretty rare. If I hit my bedtime, then I'm rarely in bed at 6. And I do find the morning just has a really special energy. Um, I'm more thoughtful. I'm naturally happy. I try to elongate that feeling as long as possible. It sometimes gets disrupted. But like just making sure that we're starting our days with, you know, just that beautiful feeling of waking up refreshed.
And it sounds like you didn't always understand or appreciate that kind of tranquility and clarity in the morning. Can you tell us, do you remember when did that shift happen for you and what provoked it?
Yeah, I think when I was young, I it didn't really have any respect for my body. So like my body was like its job was to take me where I wanted to go. Like it was to carry my brain around, and to take me, wherever to. And so I kind of abused it. And the good thing is when you're young, you can get away with it because your body recovers really fast. If you pull an all-nighter, you suffer for a day and a half maybe, but then you're like back. And as you get older, like the recovery time is like, and plus people depend on you for a lot of things, and so it's really torture if you have a young family and you are, God forbid, hungover from having too much wine the night before. I mean, you suffer so much because these children need you, and they're not going anywhere else. Like you can't.
Mm.
So I think as we all do, when we have the flexibility and the resiliency, we don't always take care of ourselves. And I guess I started just realizing the importance of self-care the more busy we get, the busier and busier life gets. Like I think life kind of gives you sometimes too much for you to handle at any given point, but it kind of doles out complexity over decades, and in terms of what you can control and who depends on you and all those kinds of things, and frankly how sharp you have to be for dealing with the complexity. And so I kind of started to recognize this trade-off of, do I take care of myself and feel good and be able to do really cool things that I want to do and reach goals that I really want to do? Or do I want to just sort of play and waste time and make poor decisions around my self-care, which then makes every goal I want harder?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a really, I don't know if people recognize the extent, a mom of adolescents probably would better than most, but young people, at least in our experience in the program, have a really hard time getting enough sleep. And, pulling away from devices is, the most common. Video games, devices is the most common challenge that they express to us in terms of, the lack of sleep. And they get in this cycle where they stay up later, so they sleep in later, then they can't go to bed early. So I love that you said this going to bed early, getting up early is self-care. And I think there's a lot of misnomers in today's world around what self-care is. So if I may ask you, sounds like for you, that's getting a good night's sleep. What else do you do that you qualify for yourself as self-care?
Yeah, I know actually some people think about self-care as like a pedicure or manicure or like a massage. My self-care principles I have 5 mandatory self-care principles, and it's healthy food, sleep, exercise, meditation, and time with people I love. And I think that fundamentally everybody needs these. And we see when we don't have them. Now, not right away. That's the problem. The problem is we'll do all of those things. We'll have beautiful time with people we'll love. We'll take some time. Now, when I say meditation, I mean stillness. I mean time in nature. I mean, listening to a really beautiful piece of music. I mean, slowing the brain down. So anything that I really have learned over the years that your body needs exercise for it to function well, and your brain needs stillness for it to function well. So it's like your brain is always active, your body is often sitting, right? So we have like reverse problems with our mind and with our body. And so our body, we have to proactively move it because it doesn't do well if it's too sedentary. And our brain is always moving, especially now with all of the media and things that kind of are flying at us. So it's always moving. And so we have to give it time to sort of settle down. And when we do all those things, and also like nutrition, which I also ignored for a while. I mean, I used to be like coffee and chocolate. That's what keeps me going, you know, and you know, and you realize over time that all these things contribute to these horrible cycles, right? These horrible cycles of like almost crashing, hucking, like, you know, kind of pushing myself through and then totally crashing. And then like, it's just these cycles, right? And when like a really nice wave pattern is like steady, it's like steady. And so if we do sugar rushes and then we can't sleep and then we're agitated, then we don't go to sleep on time, then we don't wake up, then we don't sleep well, all those kinds of things. So I've sort of, over time realizing that life is sort of a really, like, you know, the sun rises, the moon comes, the sunrise, like nature sort of shows us these really beautiful cycles. And we have the ability with all of our electricity and devices to upset those natural rhythms. But when we get back into those natural rhythms, there's so much more ease in our lives and so much more positivity and ability and can-do energy. So I think, yeah, self-care to me are the 5 practices. When I do them, I end up feeling really good. And then when I fall off the wagon and I forget to do them, I'm fine for a little bit. And then all of a sudden I'm grouchier, I'm not as productive, I can't focus as well. Like I know my symptoms, they just all come back again. And then I have to be like, oh, okay, I know how to fix this. I need to just reset again.
And just because, you know, I think sometimes, at least in my brain, and I think for many of our audience members too, we might think, okay, well, what about, you know, your cousin's getting married or you're in a trip to Paris and there's a thing happening at 11 o'clock, you're going to the Eiffel Tower at night, you know, and you're 2 hours past your bedtime. I can imagine that for you there are exceptions. Can you tell us about that? Like when does that happen and how do you think about it and how do you react?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I make all kinds of exceptions to my rule. Tonight I'm going to a Canadians game and it's going to be late and I'm going to come back late. So, you know, I make exceptions, and then I'm just extra good to myself
Mm,
to get back on track. And the hardest thing about that is that, and I say it specifically that way, I'm extra good to myself because it's the opposite of what you want to do. I mean, it's the
mm,
opposite. If you stay up late one night, then you kind of like you get into sort of like leisure mode. You kind of want to do it again, or you kind of want to be irresponsible, or you kind of like your body and your brain really only want to do what it did yesterday. Like I know that all the time, even with food. Like if I'll have a day when I just like on the weekend, right? Where you know we'll have you know dessert, and my body the very next day will be like, "Ooh, we want dessert," and it's like, no, no, no. Like we don't. We just want it because we had it yesterday, right?
mhm.
So the challenge is not whether or not you decide to you know do something different and break your wellness practices once or twice. The problem is that typically what happens is then you just start cascading that. And so I absolutely make exceptions, but then I really do think about like how am I going to be extra good to myself? And if I'm doing it where it's multiple days, I have to realize that I am not going to want to be good to myself. I'm going to want to continue this pattern of staying up late, sleeping in, eating food that is not, you know, that my body doesn't want, my mouth, my tongue just wants, like, you know, just responding to cravings rather than the things that are actually fundamental to my health.
What's interesting to me about this is that what I'm hearing is that your definition of self-care requires this pretty heavy dose of discipline, of you know positive habits that I think it's a really interesting part of this conversation to home in on because I think that again there's misunderstandings in the world about what self-care means, and I think that's a really important note to hit here that it won't happen easily necessarily or naturally, but once you've built a habit, you reap the rewards
Absolutely.
afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And now like it's funny you say going to bed early and I see like it's not false joy on your face. I can see that you have a deeper appreciation for that, which you perhaps probably didn't when you were all-nighters in chemical engineering at
Exactly,
Waterloo.
exactly. I do have an aura ring which tracks my sleep, and it shows me my sleep cycles. And I get so excited in the morning if I have double digit deep sleep. Like I'm like I
Mm,
was 12% last night. Like that's awesome because it's not that easy for me to get double digit deep
mm,
sleep. I come in and out of light sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night too, and I always kind of wake up with these little cycles, these little wake up consciousness moments. And what I realized that in the past, I used to be mad at that. Like I'd be like, oh, I've woken up. Like now I go, or I'd start thinking about something, or I'd start, and that would disrupt my sleep more than these natural rhythms. It's totally fine. You wake up, you just can. And so now I'm very strict with when I wake up, I'm very gentle. I'm like, oh, we woke up. Okay, no thinking, no doing, just rest. And so there's something really interesting about our relationship with sleep, I think, or I've just discovered it, is that the way we talk to ourselves around it is often, we all have this judge in our head that's always telling us like we're not good enough or we're lousy at this or there's always that judgment voice, right? That we all have to find a way to deal with and to not listen to all the time. And usually that's the more painful part. Like if you're gentle, like how do you talk to yourself about sleep and how do you treat yourself around sleep is probably really similar to how you treat yourself around just how much grace you give yourself when you make a mistake or when things aren't going your way or when you're a little confused, right? So it's kind of interesting to use it as a proxy for just being really good to yourself.
mm. Yeah, we do. We cover the idea of self-compassion in the program too. We have a dialogue with our students around that topic, which is often quite enlightening for them. Many of our students have not heard that term or certainly don't understand what it actually means, which sounds to me what you're describing now. So I appreciate that and this balance of being kind to yourself and being aware of the things that you might instantaneously want that are not good for yourself. Staying up late, having an extra drink, whatever it might be, playing one more video game. So I really like that. It's balance, which is what I'm hearing from you, I think. And so just to recap one more time, the five components for self-care for you: sleep, nutrition, exercise, meditation, social time with people you love. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when I say healthy food, we have to like recognize the food. Like it looks like what it was in nature. Like
Mm,
it looks like a pear or a banana or a broccoli or a piece of meat or, it looks like what it was.
mm,
So just for my idea of what healthy food is actually food. I try very hard to remind myself that a lot of the things we eat is not food.
mm.
It's manufactured substances. It's not food. And
Mm.
so my idea of healthy food is like, can I recognize it? And I'm not that strict. I eat cake every so often, right? But at least tonight I'm having carrot cake because the Molson Center has the best carrot cake in the world.
Whoa.
Um,
Didn't
but
know that.
at least I can see little shreds of carrots in my carrot cake. So I'm not that strict, but really just paying attention to like what are the choices we are doing because all of these things make up how you're going to feel. And I feel obliged to get my angel and devil. Can I get my angel and devil for
Sure,
one?
sure.
Just I have to see if I can find them. This is the part of the podcast. So self-compassion. I have these little dolls. And I got these dolls when I started my business. Because when I started my business, I was terrified. I'd always worked for someone else. I had no idea whether or not anyone would really buy my talents. I knew that companies would pay me and I would do things for them that they would pay the company for. But I didn't know if they would directly pay me for something.
Mm.
And I had a lot of doubt. And I realized I had this little monster living in my head that just kept saying like, you can't do this. You don't even know what you're doing. You're never gonna make any money. No one's gonna buy you. It was just like this. And so it was living in my head. And so I bought a doll so that I could kind of like get it out of my head and get it in front of me. And what I realized is that my angel was a wimp, like a total wimp. Like I did have this angel that's like, no, this will be good. Like, you want to do this. And like, I had an angel, but the devil was so strong. Like, she was so noisy. And so the devil would be like, my angel would be like, but we'll be so proud of ourselves if we try. And the devil would be like, but you suck. And then the angel would just run away and leave me all alone with this really mean voice, right? So the self-compassion thing is like getting these things in balance.
Hmm.
And actually, in my, I just needed to beef up my angel. Like, I just needed her to stand the ground, be like, look, thank you for worrying. Thank you for worrying. You're right. It's risky. Thanks for showing up, but we got this, like, and just sort of like find a way. So I felt obliged to show you
I love
mine.
it. Yeah. That's very cool. That's very cool that you have that kind of literal symbol of those two parts of your brain.
Yes, because sometimes we just don't, we're hearing the voices and we don't know who we are. And the reality is we're neither of them. We're
Mm.
witnessing. We're witnessing these thoughts. From the place of the witness, we're deciding how we want to move forward in our day. And so I liked sort of having them physically so that I could just witness them
Hmm.
as not me. I'm the witness, noticing all the things, all the noise, and then deciding what I'm going to do today, how I'm
Mm.
going to move my life forward today.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. We haven't had any other literal angel and devil dolls on the show yet. So you're the first. I like
Fantastic.
that. I think a lot of people will connect to that. And so if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear a little bit about perhaps we can start with what you do in your company now, and then we can work back and say, how did you get there from chemical engineering when you were 20 years old? So Leaderly, you've been doing this for, tell us how long and what is it that you do?
Sure. I started my company 9 years ago. And basically, what I do is I help people with all things leadership. And what does that mean? How do you organize your team? How do you set a vision for your team? How do you get along with other people? How do you influence other people? How do you communicate? To me, leadership is all about attracting followership. And whenever we want to do anything big in the world, whether people work for us or not, if we want to start a movement, we need followership. We need people that are inspired by the vision, the ideas, the activities that you are trying to bring to the world, and you are able to inspire a lot of people to help you with those things. And so that's kind of leadership. I define leadership at Leaderly as leading self, because that's a lot of this starts with like, how do we even lead ourselves? And that's, things that we talked about just now, the self-care and managing your thoughts and knowing what you want and setting your goals and hearing your inner voice around what you want to do with your life, right? Finding that. So leading self is a big piece of mastery, and then leading others. So now it's like, oh, okay, now we've got to figure out not just what I want, but how do I collaborate with other people? What do other people want? How do we co-create together? How do we create shared wins? And how do we create trust amongst each other to do good work? So that leading others is the second pillar. And then leading change is the third pillar. And that is like, okay, now I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. I want to change something about our world. And so now I need to figure out how do I galvanize other people around a change that I want to see in the world. And so those are kind of the three tenets. So practically what that means is I work one-on-one with people. I work one-on-one with them, sometimes just having them talk through what they're planning with their team, brainstorming how to make that maybe more effective. I get feedback for them from their team. I help them digest that feedback and figure out what they need to do more or differently to be more effective. So that's kind of my one-on-one work. I also do workshops around various topics: communication skills, sales skills, influencing skills, feedback skills, coaching skills, all kinds of things. So just workshops where people are practicing the best leadership techniques. And then I also work with teams. So executive teams that are forming, and they need to figure out, they need to get to know each other, they need to trust each other, they need to have a shared vision, and they need to perform and be able to deliver results together.
Hmm. Wow, very cool. A lot of stuff, there's a lot of overlap actually with what we do at Discover Your Source. Students may or may not kind of connect the dots there, but a lot of the things that you would be working with professionals on, we are doing a lot of that work around self-awareness, how to communicate with others, how to lead projects. So very interesting. And if you can maybe tell us a little bit, so we would perhaps define the nature of your role right now as helping people pretty directly in a number of ways. And the person who goes into chemical engineering, at least
Yeah,
traditionally speaking, would be considered someone who likes to work with things rather than
right.
people. And
Yes.
so, can you tell us how you make that choice going into university to choose to study that, and how did you evolve to the point where this is now something that you're obviously very passionate about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I did like working with things. That's why I went into chemical engineering. When I was younger, although I've always been a social person, I always found things and math and science much more predictable. And I liked that. I
Mm,
loved chemistry because when you put two chemicals together, the same thing always happens. And people are kind of unpredictable. And
mm,
so I actually did really like, I didn't like um, all the humanities courses. I didn't like all of that ambiguity. I didn't like how when I'd hand in a paper, I had no idea if it was going to be an A or a C. Like it felt very subjective. And anyway, so I really went into chemical engineering because I loved chemistry and I loved math. And I really loved those things because they were black and white and I got it. And I was right or I was wrong and I knew what mastery was. And the first part of my career, I was actually excited about technical mastery. That was exciting to me. That journey towards becoming technically competent at these skills was really enriching to me. And that kept me happy for a while, maybe, 5 to 7 years, it kind of kept me happy. And then I realized, I'm kind of tired of that. And I started shifting more. I did my MBA. So I went back to school, I did my MBA. And then after my MBA, I wanted to kind of do more business mastery. So I was like, oh, okay, there's this other thing called the business world. And that's like about revenues and profit and value propositions. And, it's like this other sort of thing. Whereas the engineering was like, solve this technical problem. And there was like, oh no, figure out this market and how like the exchange of goods and supply chains and stuff. So I got really interested in business mastery. So I worked as a management consultant for many years doing activities around optimizing the business. So it's still very process and a little bit technical, but it was sort of broader themed and a little bit less black and white, right? And as I was doing those kinds of activities and working on a lot of business plans and transformations in companies, or just trying to figure out, what is the strategy for that company? What I realized is that it's all about people. And so it was kind of a surprise to me. Like I was like, oh, oops. Like no matter how good the strategy is, if people don't believe in it, don't care about it, aren't engaged in it, they're not going to deliver it well. And so what started to happen was I realized that if I wasn't able to be a good leader, I couldn't get the results that I needed to get. And to be able to be a good leader meant to really have amazing people skills. And so then I started to get fascinated about this thing around leadership, my own leadership, what that even meant. And I just, whenever I get a little bit confused, I study. I just started studying. I had several executive coaches. I went to lots of leadership development, and I started to learn all these things that were now interesting to me, and probably, 15 years earlier or 20 years earlier were not interesting to me at all, but they were interesting to me now. And I kind of fell in love with this idea of leadership mastery. So my career kind of went technical mastery, business mastery, leadership mastery. I don't know where it's going to go next, but leadership feels like a big thing for me. I think your journey to your best leader is like almost like an infinite journey because there's always ways to harness more and more of your leadership.
Really cool. What I'm hearing is that you were excited about math and chemistry, and so you chose the program and you kind of went after it. And you not only did the program, but you worked in that field for a little while. And then you kept an open mind and you were exploratory and obviously a curious person. And so you kind of let those curiosities lead you. And I'm wondering if you can describe, if you can remember, what was your mindset going into university? Did you think I'm going there to get a degree? I'm going to get this job. That's what I'm going to do forever. Or were you like, oh, this is interesting. I want to just go and learn. All right. How did you experience entering into university?
Yeah, it's always interesting because I was one of five girls. So I have three older sisters growing up, one younger. And I always was a little impacted by what I was witnessing. And I witnessed my three older sisters being really confused and not having it easy to find a job, and not really sure what they wanted to do. And they all reacted to it a little bit differently. Some of them partied a lot and sort of distracted themselves from that. And others like really like, and some of like at periods really kind of suffered a little bit or was really disappointed as they started to kind of make their way into the world. Like, is this all there is kind of energy? So I was kind of the mind of, I don't want to have trouble. I don't want to have trouble getting a job, and I don't want to have trouble showing what I'm worth. So I was kind of in this energy around, I want a skill that I want to be able to prove that I have something to like, I want to have like validated skill. So I was a little bit focused on like, I want to build confidence in a skill that the market recognizes and that will get me a job. And I went to Waterloo. I went to the University of Waterloo. And what really helped me there was the co-op program, because I worked every 4 months. So every 4 months I went to work. And because of that program, I had to interview. Like, I had to do like 15 interviews every 4 months to get a job. So I got really good at interviewing, and I got really good at starting a job, figuring out how to add value and getting a result, and then like doing it all over again. And I did that 6 times. And that gave me a lot of confidence around like, no matter where I go, I kind of know how to add value, or how to demonstrate my skill set. And so that part for me was, it was good. It was fun. The challenge later was that I got really good at sort of doing what everybody else wanted me to do. And then I was kind of like, I don't even like this anymore. Like, I remember being in a plant in northern Quebec at like 2 a.m. running a biocide chemical trial in a pulp and paper plant. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, like, I hate everything about the way I look and feel. Like, I don't even want to do this anymore, right? So the hard part for me was not sort of that. It was kind of like the now what, right? And I've had a number of those now whats. I had that now what as an engineer. I then went in, as I described, into management consulting, and I loved that for a while. And then I loved sort of this idea of being a corporate leader with very big teams. And then all of a sudden I was like, I hate this. Now what? and so this idea of just reattuning and really listening to the whispers and not having the right balance between knowing that you have to add value for a salary and money, which we all need to live, is value exchange. So you're going to get money for exchanging your value. So you have to figure out like, what value are you bringing to market that people are going to pay you for? And so that value exchange thing is kind of an interesting thing to figure out. But that value exchange is different depending on what industry, what services, all these kinds of things. And I always found it to be a little bit interesting around, you don't want to just offer whatever the market is buying. You want to offer something that you want to give, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think during my career, it's been this whole, these moments where I've lost touch with what I wanted, and then had to kind of reset and say, this is what I want now. But then you have to build your credibility within that new space, which 9 years ago was terrifying, because everybody just wanted me to do what I was doing before. Everybody wanted me to continue doing business consulting. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I had to build credibility again. So really 3 times in my career, I kind of had to build credibility. But I think that's fun. I think that's what we all want to do as we continue to pivot towards, like, one of the things I learned in life is you can't do something well if you don't like it. And so if you don't like it, you have to transform it. Sometimes we have to transform it. I mean, some people are brilliant at transforming. I mean, sometimes you hear people talk about how they were doing a job, that they hated, I don't know, making coffee for other people, but then they just enjoyed the people and they enjoyed the conversations and they joined the this and they transformed the experience of that role that they maybe hated into something that was very fulfilling. So if you can't do it well unless you like it, and if you don't like it, you have to either transform it or you have to do something else.
I really connect to the idea of it being fun, although I'm not sure everyone would necessarily in the moment describe it as such. When you go from being pretty knowledgeable and skilled and well paid in one industry or job to another where you have no experience, because I followed that pattern also 3 times, interestingly, on route to starting my own company. And what I one of the things that I really deeply appreciate about that experience is the humility that it
Mhm.
brought to me and the understanding of what it's like emotionally for someone else to be starting over after having done a lot of work in something. So I would love to know, it's an unfair question, but if you have any thoughts on the idea, knowing that there are many people in the world for a long time who get stuck in that thing that they no longer enjoy and for a variety of reasons can't pull themselves away or can't see the fun in starting something, can't get over their own self-doubt as the devil that's in their brain, that half. How did what's different about you that enabled you, you think, to make those changes when you knew it was kind of you were done with your previous career?
Um, I think it's that gauge of, I mean, okay, I can't take credit for my last shift because my last shift, my husband dared me and I took the dare in kind of this really dysfunctional way. uh, but he dared me because I was not being myself. So, when we're ourselves, like when we are really ourselves, we are optimistic, we are mostly happy, and we are mostly fun to be with people that we love. That's who we all are. Now, when we get all twisted up for whatever reasons, difficult circumstances in our lives, lack of sleep, bad things happening to whatever, like when we get all twisted up, then we are not ourselves and we're grumpy and we're not fun to be with, and it's very hard to be fun and it's very hard to have fun, and we're cynical and we don't notice the beauty. We see a sunset and we're like, yeah, I've seen it before. Like we just don't notice the beauty. And my last shift was like, I was in that mode. And my husband was like, you are miserable. And if you're this miserable, then you need to quit. And he's like, I dare you to quit. And then I just like, I took the dare, which was like really irresponsible looking back. Um, and once I had realized how irresponsible it was, I had already quit my job because it happened very fast. And then I couldn't unquit and, that kind of thing. So, sometimes it's your own voice and sometimes it's the impact you're having on people you love. I mean, I said at that dinner where he dared me to quit, I said, I just wish I could like make the next 18 months of my life disappear. And he got really mad. And I didn't mean it as a bad thing. I just meant, because in 18 months, I'm going to have the right team in place and I'll have solved this problem and I'll be good. I'll be good at this job. And he got really mad because he said, in 18 months, you're going to have a new job, because he'd seen the pattern. Like I would just get a hard job and then I'd like work really, like I'd gotten into this pattern where I'd get a hard job and I'd work really, really hard and and then I'd get it okay, 18 months to 2 years, and then I'd be promoted and they'd give me another hard job. And he was like, if you don't like what you're doing, see, that's the thing. Like sometimes when we're doing things, growth and struggle are like, they're like neighbors. But the attitude you're able to maintain is what shows whether it's growth or struggle. And I had always loved growth. I always loved to be on the edge of my comfort zone. I still love that, right? That is where life happens, is on the edge of your comfort zone. But when the edge of your comfort zone is making you really grumpy, then something has gone awry. Like you've lost the thread. And so he kind of called me on it. He got mad because he said, you want to wish the next 18 months of our lives away. And I said, no, I didn't say that. Like just the work part, like it was like Mayday, this conversation's going badly, right? And he said, of our kids' lives, of the time we have, of your precious life, like he really got mad. And then he said, like, you have to quit if that's really how you feel. And I said, well, that's how I feel. I really felt like I just didn't want to live the next 18 months of getting that team back on track, or getting the organization where I felt I needed to get. And so when you don't want to live, when it's impacting all the other aspects of your life, I think like it's a really big sign.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think, you earlier you touched upon this idea of balance, and right now you're saying struggle and growth are neighbors, and I think that this is an important part of the conversation where as young people kind of continue to grow and learn, it's sometimes hard to know what's the right kind of hard versus the wrong kind of hard, and how
Yeah.
much is too much stress versus, a productive amount. And these are things that a lot of our audience members and our students are
Yeah.
working through. So I think it's really important for them to hear that there are different ways of experiencing hard things, and you want to just learn to be more and more aware, and also get the help from honest people around you who love you, who say like, "Whoa, I saw you do that, and you looked like that was hard, but you were smiling,
Yeah.
and now I see you doing this, and you're not smiling anymore."
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think that's a really important thing for them to hear is just, keep learning about what the hard things are for you that are motivating versus not.
Yeah, I mean the challenge response of the brain and the stress response like are totally a matter of interpretation. So basically the challenge response, you get all activated and kind of excited and and you still get like you get adrenaline, you get all these like you still get some of those neurochemicals, cortisol, you even get a little bit of cortisol, which but it activates the body and there are no health downsides because it's a challenge response because we're like, ooh, this is challenging, this is fun. And then when they study negative stress, it's where people are like, this is hard and this sucks, right? And then that's negative stress. You get all these neurochemicals to be able to do it, but then you have all these health detriments. That's where heart disease comes from, and all these other things come. So it's so interesting how it is these small interpretations, right? Of what is my interpretation of this? Is this a struggle I want? Is this part of my growth trajectory? Is it a challenge I'm stepping up to? And you can actually be in that challenge response, and really, really happy. And it doesn't mean that everything goes well. It's just that you make yourself proud. For me, that's the big thing. When you try something and fail out it, you can still make yourself proud, right? And so as long as you're moving in a direction that's making yourself proud, like I don't care, I'm going to try it. I have no idea how it's going to go, but I'm going to be proud of myself. Then you're on your growth edge.
Hmm. Yeah, you're bringing back memories for me of some of the things that were really hard that I did in life and loved, versus things that were totally life-sucking for me and draining. And I think it's perhaps, just given the kind of state of people's awareness of their own mental health and well-being in today's world, to also just mention that we often can't see these things. We see them less clearly, much more murky if we're already in a depressed state, if we're feeling excessive levels of anxiety. So, and again, what is excessive? What is a natural depression? So these are things that, again, all of us at some point learn about ourselves, but we're in a world today where people are much more aware of these things, and so I think it's just important to note that it's even less obvious when something's a good challenge versus a bad one when we are in that kind of more negative emotional state as a bit
Absolutely.
of a baseline, which
Yeah.
that's a whole other conversation. But I love hearing how you describe it, and the way you're describing these things, really aligns with a lot of the conversations we have in the program. And I think we could talk for a really long time, but for the sake of our kind of typical episode length, we'll have to wrap up. But maybe really quickly, a couple of rapid fires, and then our last question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So the one thing that we haven't touched on at all, I think we've talked about a lot of other questions in various ways, but our students love to travel. They travel in February. Can you tell us briefly, where's your favorite place you ever traveled to, and why?
Yeah, I wrote down Italy and India, two eyes. I can't pick one. So I love Italy for the love of life, for the food, for the environment, for the culture, for the like it's just like joie de vivre on stereo. It's just sort of that yeah. So that's why I love Italy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I love India for the chaos, for the color, for the people, for the sheer the determination, the struggle, the ambition, I mean, it's just like it's it's for a totally different reason. But I couldn't pick one.
Okay, something with the eyes, something with the letter I for you. Interesting. We can
Yeah,
explore that another time.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, very, very cool places. How about really quickly a lesson that you've learned? We've talked a lot about leadership and relationships and social time, but what's a lesson that you've learned about relationships?
Yeah. That they get stronger in it's your job. So here's kind of my position on relationships. It's to your advantage to enhance the quality of every relationship in your life. And what I mean by that is every conversation, just think about, is this conversation going to enhance the quality of this relationship, even by a millimeter? And if you live your life going into a conversation being like, I'm going to position this such that it has a chance of increasing the quality of this relationship, even by a millimeter, there's just such an incredible compounding effect of your relationships. And I think about me sometimes as like a little spider in a spider web. And you know, when you see spiders in a big spider web and they have so many webs and they can like, and the wind comes and it's so stable, like this thing is so stable and they can go in every direction imaginable. I mean, that to me is your network. That's your relationship map. And so playing relationships, playing a long-term game with relationships, always paying attention to the quality of the relationship, because you cannot achieve what you want on your own in this life. And if you think you can, then you're not aiming high enough. So, you know, the exponential factor of relationships. And they get stronger when you ask for advice. They get stronger when you ask for help. A lot of people think relationships are, you know, I just need to give, give, give. It's not. They're shared. They get stronger when you experience shared wins together. So just, you know, pay attention to the quality of them and pay attention to enhancing them.
One lesson that Discover has taught me very clearly that I understood intellectually previously, and then there's lots of research around what you just mentioned of the utility and the beauty of asking others for their help. And so many people resist it, and I'm sure you see this in your work, and I see this in my work with students and professionals all the time, that people are very hesitant to ask other people for things, especially in today's world perhaps more than anything else. But I've really seen, especially because of the community, people like yourself, Discover, who take great, I can see it in their face and they tell me about it and they write it to us and they say, wow, it's so meaningful for me to be, you know, helping in some small way for the students or for the mission. So I just wanted to accentuate that because I do think, and a lot of our students express a difficulty in asking for help, and people, it's not about you always. It's sometimes it's really helpful for the other person too.
Yeah, and I always try to remind people, like I run into a lot of people who actually their kind of career is limited because they're actually not good at asking for help. And they're often givers. And that's really beautiful. But then I'll say, why are you a giver? And they'll say, well, I like how it feels. I like how it feels. And I was like, well, you're robbing other people of that feeling.
Mm.
Like they want to give, and you are like, and the fact that you're not asking, you're not receiving their gifts, it's like somebody trying to give you a present on your birthday and you being like, I don't want it, I don't need it. You know, like it's rude, right? It's rude.
Yeah.
And I said it also devalues them. So I try to make, you know, if you're like, I'd rather give somebody something than receive, you're robbing the other person of that same joy of mutual, you know, we are pack animals as humans. We want mutually beneficial relationships. It fires us up.
Hmm.
And so if you don't ask for help, you're robbing the other person of the wonderful feeling that you receive when you give.
Yeah, agree. We don't have time to talk about this, but one thing that our students might be interested to hear about, and I think just in general, I think it's interesting to note that you're married, you have two, you know, young adult
Mhm.
children, and you have lived your entire family life in a condo in Montreal. We didn't mention you're from Montreal, and when we first spoke, I thought that was amazing because I have three kids, and I think, wow, how could we pack that into a condo? But like you mentioned, you kind of make it work, right? So I think that in today's world where a lot of young people are mindful of like, will I be able to buy a house? What will that look like? You know, and perhaps condos are going to become more and more prevalent. Who knows? But I think that our students might be interested to learn like, what was important in making that work? You know, in a typically smaller space. Why did you decide to do that? And what benefits and challenges came from it? I think that would be an interesting topic for them.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to? I'll try to do the 30-second version.
Sure, 30 second, 30 second.
I mean, in short, um, I just felt like right sizing, like the challenge with work and life is that it adds complexity. So you have kids, there's more complexity. And we have to decide where we're going to introduce complexity and where we're not going to introduce complexity. If you have a bigger house, you have more complexity. You have more rooms to take care of, you have more rooms to furnish, you have more things that'll break, you have more. And so my husband and I, when we started out, it was a small condo and we were kind of like, this will be fine for us. We had no intention of raising a family. But then, we had one son and we're like, why add complexity? Like there's a second bedroom. It's not that big, but there's room. So why add complexity, right? And then I got pregnant 3 years later and I was like, well, if it's a boy, they can share a room. And people are like, share a room? Like on what planet do people share a room? And then sure enough, it was a boy. It's like, oh, great. We don't need to move. So, I mean, were there periods of time where it was like, ooh, I'm not sure this is like working? Did my kids think we were crazy because none of their friends lived in small apartments? When we went to Europe, they thought it was normal, right? There's like, that's the other thing too. You can go all over the world and realize if there is a human living that way somewhere, then it's probably doable,
Yep.
right? It's not just because everyone else has, adopted a certain lifestyle. So I think in life, you're always trying to figure out like, where do I want to add complexity and where do I want to keep things simple? And it was really simple to keep this little house, and now they're leaving and it's the right size again.
And it's worthwhile noting too, not only kind of current day in other countries, in many other countries, would that kind of square footage, the size of your home be normal or perhaps even big, certainly in like a place like Japan,
Yeah.
or New York City, but also to remember that until recently, not we, but everyone lived in places that size, and that was the norm. So to the expectation of the huge house today is a new trend. So, anyways, I love it. I think that was really cool.
We always have to figure out wants versus needs. I'm always really like I can't remember what my son said the other day, and he's like, I need this. And I was like, okay, now hang on a second. Like, tell me if that's a want, that's not a need. Like, let's think about this, right? So we have to think about wants versus needs because
Yeah.
the wants are unending and they distract you from sometimes your real need because we're just sort of like we're distracted, I mean, sometimes my real need is, absolute stillness. But my wants will be like, I want to go here and I want to go there and I want to travel here and I want this and I want that and I want this. But that is probably indicative of the fact that actually what I need is none of it. I need
Mhm.
to recenter. So just paying attention to what's a want and what's a need, and everything is figure outable. Everything
Yeah.
is, unless you're breaking the laws of physics, everything is figure outable. And you can live a very, very beautiful life in millions of different ways. And you can't let anyone else convince you otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's a good message to remind everyone who's listening to whenever the next time we say, I need this, to just take a pause and say, is it really a need or is it something that I want? And there's nothing wrong with wanting things. We all want them. But to use the correct language to ourselves and to others is, again, something that we talk about at Discovery a lot. And I think a really important message. So, last question. Thanks, Marissa. So we call these good life conversations. The reason we named them that is because early on in Discovery, we brought in people, we asked them to talk about their careers and what they do at work. And we found that that was, somewhat interesting, but the students often had questions about the periphery, all the other really important parts of life that we seemed to be overlooking at the time. And so
Mhm.
we think about relationships and adventure and communication and work and leisure time and hobbies. So, with that in mind, and kind of given the current state of the world, which has changed quite a bit recently, and a lot of young people kind of getting a lot of mixed messaging through their smartphones, through social media, through the internet, it's pretty complicated to understand perhaps what a good life looks like for them. So, what advice would you offer our young listeners in terms of how to create a good life for themselves?
Yeah, I could pick so many different things, but I think what I'll pick right now is create more than consume. So during the pandemic, this was really difficult in my household, so difficult that I made a big sign that I stuck on the wall that said create more than consume. Because what happened during the pandemic when school stopped and my two boys were at home, they just started consuming everything under the sun, watching YouTube, watching that, like just, And I just said, I have one rule. I'm not going to give you curriculum because at the time there was like, no, I'm not going to give you curriculum, but I'm going to tell you that you're going to track when you're creating something and when you're consuming something. And all I expect from you from an 8-hour day while I'm at work is that you create slightly more than you consume. So if you watch a YouTube video, then make a YouTube video. If you play a computer game, then try to code a little bit of a computer game. If you listen to music, then go play music for a little bit and do that a little bit more than what you consume. And if you do that, you will unpack interests and excitement and things that are, we are here. You have this one shot at light to play and to create things. And I think that in a world where there's just so much consumption available, it's the same with food. Like, it should take longer to create it than to eat it. It does, so, cook a meal. If it's faster to get it than it is to eat it, and you didn't create it, right?
Mm.
You're just trying to figure out how do we create more than we consume. And if you continuously do that, you're going to have a beautiful life.
That's great. Create more than you consume. I think, like you said, it's easy to get into the consumption mode, but I really like that message. So thank you.
My pleasure. I can't wait to
Thank
hear people's questions.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure they'll look forward to meeting you too, and that'll be a productive conversation. So thanks again for doing this. We could go on, but I look forward to talking more in the future.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for listening, and this has been another Good Life conversation. We hope to see you at the next one.